the hardest parts of drawing clothes is figuring out where to put the folds. Sometimes you add too many, sometimes you add too few, and it's not obvious why. So it's going to be about how you work with fabrics and the logistics of how they work. I'm going to be using a cowboy reference, which I want to show now. Sometimes it's important to keep in mind the type of clothes your character is wearing. So for example, if there's a bit more texture to it, you may be using a mixture of thin lines and thick lines to represent, for example, fur. But if it was smooth material such as like a cotton shirt, you may use long straight lines. So I'm going to do two types of drawings for this reference. The first one I'm going to do is going to start off with some sketchy lines. So what I want to do with this reference and this drawing is to keep the sketches loose. I want to capture the movement of the character. I'm going to be asking myself questions like, why is the fabric moving that way? When the arm is lifted, for example, compared to when the arm is maybe a bit more relaxed. So, while I am drawing some of the anatomy parts, the focus here is on the fabrics. And the goal here is to maybe spend 5 minutes, maybe 7, on this character. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you just want to get the general gist of how this character is going to work. Afterwards, you may want to spend a bit more time to see how a 5-minute drawing compares to, let's say, a 10-minute one. And what details you start to focus on when you have more time to draw clothes. But right now you can see over here when clothes were bunched, I used very small lines, just to represent those folds. But now that I'm drawing straight legs, I've only used like one line and then bunched them up at the bottom because that's when the clothes are folding. Just add the shoes. Okay, so that's me spending, I think that was even closer to 3 minutes, but with this extra time, I can go in and maybe start to think a bit more logically about the folds and why I want to put them there. So this is an important fold here. It represents where the arm is bending. So I may go in and put a bit more detail there. And then maybe add where some of the folds, some more important folds that I think help. So there's a bit more turning around the kind of stomach area. So everything is kind of turning this way. And then it gets a bit more bunched up at the bottom. With the legs, I may add the seams here, just so that you can kind of get a 3D effect. And then when it comes to the crotch area, the legs are going down, so you may want to add some small folds going straight and then moving downwards at an angle. So those are the sketchy lines and my kind of thought process behind them. The next one I want to do is kind of a bit more technical with straighter lines. So I'll start again. Again, I may spend maybe the same amount of time. What I like about drawing just freehand, going straight in, is that you have to deal with the mistakes you make. And from those mistakes, you may learn a bit more about what you're drawing. So maybe a few happy accidents. So when it comes to the shirt, the type of fabric it is, it's kind of just maybe a cotton shirt, so I can just use straight lines to represent those parts of the clothes. You can see here that maybe the collar of the jacket above the shirt maybe a bit more furry, so I'd like tinier lines to represent those fur. The likelihood is that the light is coming from downwards, so the lines will be a bit darker on the top and light at the darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. And then one technique I do is starting from the bottom of whatever part I'm drawing and then kind of connecting it at the top. So these shoulder flaps for the coat start at the bottom, go to the top, and then I can see that this is going to be a straight line, so I just do one line to represent that all. So I'm going to be facing some folds now, and you can start to see that it's very triangular, so just going to be adding kind of triangles to make this easier. Because it's a big coat, it's not very tight fitting, so I'm gonna use less folds than if I was to draw a tightly fitting shirt, for example. I'll represent one here and then move on to the hand. Moving on to this side, the right hand side. Again, I can see that there's not really many folds on the outside of the arm, so most of the folds are coming in because his arm is kind of bent. What I'm going to focus on is this fold here, because again, I think it's the most important, and then I can kind of omit any other folds if I don't think they're that important. And then with the shirt, these folds are going to be a bit more thinner because, again, a shirt is of thinner material than the jacket and it's a bit more tightly fitting, so I'm going to represent them with smaller lines going back to the top. Again, like I did before, the lines go downwards and then they kind of bunch up at the bottom. just notice that these lines don't necessarily need to be too technical. I could easily try to copy it one for one, but I don't think that's important, as long as you represent that, you know, these lines are bunching up together. Another opportunity to just draw a straight line here for the bottom of the jacket. And then straight lines for the trousers. A bit of bunching up at the bottom. So here you can see a straight line. It folds in, which I draw with one line, and then I start on the out and then go back in. And then that's how I can kind of just show that things are bunching up at the bottom compared to the rest of the leg. A good thing here, especially when I draw with like more technical lines, is that even with this straight line, if I wanted to add a fold, I can still technically do it. So that's now going in, and then I can bring it back out, and then boom, that's a fold there. And then I can draw the other foot here, and I think that's all the kind of knowledge, or that's all the information I want to put in for this particular drawing. And that's with probably like 5 minutes of work, maybe less, maybe more. But I think I've captured all the information that I need to. So smaller lines with the shirt, I'm representing that it's thicker. As a jacket with these less folds, and then straight lines for just the jacket, so it's not crumpled up, it's just a straight coat. I'll even add a line here, and that's just to make it easier for myself. So here you can see a comparison of some sketchy lines compared to a bit more technical with going straight in, no guidelines. And this can be good practice to see the differences between, you know, looser drawings and more technical drawings. But you can try them out, see what method works best for you and what you like most. And yeah, that's the end of my video. Hopefully that helps with how you can draw clothes with folds and other drapery studies.